Hi and welcome to the Small Business MBA. My name is Yasmin Ali. When I was at university 20 years ago and learning about business from an academic perspective, I was lucky enough to be lectured by one of the veritable gurus of marketing. This was when I first came across this concept of unique selling proposition. And I've always carried something that he said with me, and that is that there is very little unique in this world. Even 20 years ago, he taught us that notwithstanding those things that can be patented and have the luxury of going through that process before it goes to market, everything can be copied. The two exceptions, and therefore the things that he advocated you worked on the most fervently, were your people and your brand. Now, employees have become very mobile. While I agree with Richard Branson that if you look after your employees well, they will look after your customers well. And I do believe that employees who feel appreciated tend to be more loyal and stay. The fact is that you cannot really control how long your employees stay with you. Your brand, however, is something that you can manage and build and turn into an absolute asset. We have previously covered the topic of what branding is, but today I'd like to look at the science of how to build a brand. Small businesses often do not have big budgets, and as a result, once the logo has been designed and the website completed, little goes into actively building the brand. This is understandable, since not only are there other priorities, but most entrepreneurs believe that they can only build their brand through doing the work. Doing the work will get their name out there, and that will build the brand. This isn't wrong, but if you actively build the brand, you will be able to get your name out there more quickly. This gives you the ability to deliver more and therefore, again, accelerate the building of your brand. In other words, the building of your brand is not a one-dimensional process that lives only in your marketing. Instead, it becomes an integrated function in your business. By putting active effort into it, you build other parts of your business and vice versa. However, understand that this is a double-edged sword. For example, your best marketing efforts will be thwarted by your inability to deliver. In extreme cases, a brand can be so adversely damaged by this that the entrepreneur decides to close the business and start again, sometimes under a new name or new brand. This then negates the work done and time taken to build the previous business. Of course, you always take the lessons with you, but starting again is never easy. Building a brand is not easy, even with a budget. And it often takes more time than we care to admit. You see, building a brand is one thing, but having people trust the brand is something completely different. With social media and the ability of people to connect and discuss their experiences, and also the ability to do good research before we commit, one bad experience from a customer can negate the trust built up with so many. Of course, how we handle that bad experience can turn that into a positive again for the brand. Let's take an example of a restaurant. As a foodie, I may go to a new restaurant and share my experience on Facebook or Instagram. My friends see it. It looks good, and they then go to the restaurant to experience what I experienced. The restaurant's brand is out there in a positive light. As more people give it good reviews, more people take pictures, more people hear about it and go to support it. Good so far, right? But what happens when someone has a bad experience? What happens when, for example, someone informs the restaurant of someone with a food allergy and makes a request that the restaurant agrees to, but then the restaurant does not honor that? What would happen to that brand if this person were to speak about the poor experience that they had on social media? Of course, this may affect the brand very, very badly. And given the number of people who now know the restaurant, the effects may be terrible. But what if the owner were to pick this post up? How would he be able to manage his brand reputation in this scenario? Well, firstly, an apology perhaps. Then maybe an explanation of what went wrong, as well as an offer of restitution in some way. You see, we will forgive a brand for making a mistake, but we need them to manage the situation in a way that rebuilds our trust. You see, the best brands are built on the business's identity. This is more than, for example, being young and creative. It comes down to how the business sees the world and their place in the world and the industry. It speaks to the feeling that they want a person to get when they hear the brand name or see anything connected to the brand. It's about what the entrepreneur wants the brand to be known for and what the personality of the brand is. I recommend to my entrepreneurs that they see their brand as a person. What does this person look like? What are they wearing? Where do they hang out? What sorts of friends do they have? I know that it may seem silly, but I promise that it helps to take the brand from being something abstract and vague to something more easy to verbalize and explain to outsiders. Our business brands are so personal that sometimes it gets lost in our own minds, and while we may understand it clearly, it may be more complicated for those not intimately familiar with us. We also want to be clear on how we add value to our customer. Again, ask yourself why you started this business in the midst of all of your competitors. With all the options of businesses that exist out there, why this one? In other words, what was the driving force behind your passion for your business? This should be the core of all your activities in your business, and your brand building is no exception to this. It speaks to your core competencies, your vision and your mission, which systems you would concentrate on building primarily, how you sell, and even who your target market is. On a tough day, these are the things that get us out of bed, and we interact with our customers. This is what we focus on. This then helps us to keep our message consistent. Consistency is key in the way that we manage our brand. But that does not mean that we constantly give our stakeholders the same communication. In other words, we need to give our entrepreneurs various communications speaking to common messages and a common feel, but with different pieces and types of communication. The one thing that I would caution against is avoiding modeling completely against a big brand or someone you admire. While I absolutely agree that learning from others is an important component of being an entrepreneur, I'd strongly suggest that you look at why the message works for that business. Chances are the reason that it works for that entrepreneur is very different to what your reasons for existence are and what your drivers are. So rather look at why it works for them, what you need to work on for you, and then implement it as needed. It takes time. So ensure that you have the patience to go the distance. Just because things don't happen for you immediately, don't chop and change. Remember that consistency is key and that it may happen when you're not looking. Keep at it with the same message. Perhaps consult with someone that you trust or an expert, but do not change track just because the calls didn't come flooding in immediately. In fact, if the calls do come flooding in, perhaps look at what you're promising because you may be overstretching yourself. With that, after the break, we talk to someone who has taken 10 years to build a brand that has become a South African icon.